Thank you, and thank you for that kind introduction. I hope you find this subject as fascinating as I do. Let me begin with a big picture comment. One of the enduring questions of human existence is what happens after we die, right? It ranks right up there with where did we come from and how should we live? And it's been the source of endless speculation in every culture, every belief system, every era of history, and of course, every time someone we know passes away. We ask things like, where did they go and where are they now? Will we ever see them again? These questions transcend the human condition, and we keep imagining the answers. We keep theorizing. We keep hoping. But what if, and think about how profound this would be, what if we had actual data about what happens after we die, rather than just debating the philosophy or the theology of it? Actual data. That would be revolutionary, wouldn't it, if we could look at these questions a bit more scientifically? Well, I'm here today to tell you that we do already have that kind of data, and we're seeing more of it every year. It's part of a 50-year ongoing study by researchers who are not trying to prove anything. They're just investigating an unusual phenomenon, interviewing people who nearly died, people whose heart stopped temporarily, whose brainwaves flattened, and who claim to have had some sort of life-after-death experience during that time before they were resuscitated. Now, I get it. You may already be formulating objections based on some preconceived notion of near-death experiences, but hear me out on this. I was pretty skeptical myself until I actually reviewed the evidence. So let me share some of it with you. 3 specific lines of evidence. Here's what we know. First, thousands of people all over the world have reported taking some sort of out-of-body journey when their physical body went into cardiac arrest, during a medical operation, or after a car accident, or while they were drowning, or any number of contexts. And the curious thing about these journey reports isn't just how many there are or how global, but how consistent they are. Many of these stories feature the same core elements, and you may have heard of some of these. Seeing their body from above, moving through a tunnel, an encounter with a being of light, the feeling of perfect peace and unconditional love, meeting other spiritual beings, angels or deceased loved ones, being escorted through a place of indescribable beauty, sometimes reaching a boundary or a point of no return, and then returning to their body, often involuntarily. Now, no 2 of these reports are exactly the same, but consider this. How likely is it that so many of these experiences would unfold in a similar order if they were simply dreams or hallucinations, or the product of a dying brain? The point is this. The prevalence and consistent pattern of these reports should make us dig deeper into whether our consciousness actually survives our body. That's one line of evidence, the prevalence and consistent pattern of these near-death reports. The second is that people who go through these experiences usually come back changed, different. Most of them no longer fear death because they're confident they know what's next. And many of them no longer fear life. They begin taking more risks and they start enjoying life to the fullest. Plus, there are countless stories of people whose lives turned around completely after their experience. They become better people. They love the people around them more. Many become pastors or other church leaders. And those who had a distressing or hellish near-death experience, you may have heard of those. Researchers estimate that at about 15 to 20% of these events. Those people are even more likely to turn their lives around. Now, if you're thinking that changed lives aren't really proof of anything, well, you're right about that. But this second line of evidence simply shows that whatever these experiences are, they're real enough to create total transformation in people's lives, which is what we'd expect if the experiences are actually perceptions of reality. So the plot thickens. Okay, there's the prevalence and consistent pattern of these reports, and there's the changed lives afterwards. That's all what we might call preliminary or prima facie evidence. But this third line of evidence gets us much closer to what we might call proof. It's the corroborated evidence for life-after-death experiences, meaning the claims these people made about the experience were verified by others as accurate. Verified by others? How could that be? Well, sometimes it's an accurate report from this person about what happened in the operating room during their surgery while they were incapacitated. No reason that they should know such small technical details, but somehow they did. Sometimes it's an accurate report about events farther away from where the person was dying, someplace else in the hospital or outside of it, or even miles away, back at their home. It's inexplicable how they would know these things. And occasionally, the verification comes in the form of receiving previously unknown information from someone that they allegedly met in the afterlife. Again, the difference in these accounts and what makes people take these accounts seriously is that there's corroboration of the claims, just like in a court of law when some witness's story checks out as true. Some examples will help clarify this. So let me share an abbreviated version of a few of these stories, but recognize there are now hundreds of reports that have been corroborated, making them increasingly difficult for us to ignore. In one story out of Seattle, a woman who was resuscitated after a heart attack insisted that she saw a sneaker on a third-floor window ledge of a hospital as her consciousness floated upward. And she got very detailed about it. She described it as a man's left sneaker, dark blue, with a wear mark over the little toe region and a shoelace tucked under the heel. And as it turns out, she was exactly right. The nurse who eventually found the sneaker said, and I quote, "The only way she could have had such a perspective was if she had been floating right outside at very close range to the tennis shoe. I retrieved the shoe and brought it back." Here's another peculiar account. A woman was pronounced dead on arrival at the hospital, but the medical team was able to restore her heartbeat. She later awoke from a coma, claiming to have floated over her body while the staff revived her. Now, the nurses kind of rolled their eyes at this. Apparently, they had always dismissed such stories as dreams or brain malfunctions or drug reactions, but this patient had a habit of memorizing numbers because of her obsessive-compulsive disorder, and she told the nurses that during her out-of-body experience, she saw and memorized a 12-digit serial number that was on top of the respirator. Okay, they indulged her and they wrote down the number that she gave them. So imagine being in that room for a minute. This respirator machine is about 7 feet high, so the nurse called for a maintenance man to check on top of it. The guy shows up with a ladder and they ask him, "Is there a number on top of that machine?" Yeah, there is. Happened to be the exact 12-digit number this patient had given to the nurses. Just crazy, jaw-dropping stuff. Then there was this account published in The Lancet, which is a top medical journal in Europe. These stories I'm sharing aren't just internet kooks, okay? The journal reported that a patient in cardiac arrest was brought into a Dutch hospital, unresponsive and not breathing. The medical staff removed his dentures to insert a ventilation tube, and they put the dentures in the drawer of a nearby crash cart. A few days later, the man regained consciousness. He was told that his dentures were lost in the chaos of the moment, but the patient, claiming to have seen all these events from above, knew precisely where the dentures were, and he even identified the nurse who put them in the cart. The article went on to say, quote, "He was also able to describe correctly and in detail the small room in which he had been resuscitated, as well as the appearance of those present, despite having been in a deep coma and in the process of CPR at the time." Now, notice something. In each of these cases, the person returned with accurate information they should not have known. The same has happened in the cases of little kids coming back from these experiences talking about siblings that they never knew they had, siblings that had passed away. How did they know that? No one had ever told them because they were too young, but somehow they came back knowing about their deceased sister. There are even documented accounts of the blind seeing for the first time during these near-death experiences and returning with accurate, specific descriptions of their surroundings. Now, for the sake of integrity, we don't want to overstate the case, so I should emphasize that we are nowhere near the threshold of beyond a reasonable doubt with these accounts. But what we can say with confidence is that the mounting corroborated evidence, along with that supplemental evidence we mentioned earlier, the volume and consistency of these reports, along with the changed lives afterward, is clearly making it more likely than not that at least some of these experiences are indeed perceptions of reality, perceptions of what happens after we leave this world, actual data about what happens after we die. Let me summarize this section and then we'll take some questions. Bottom line, no matter your theology, no matter your worldview, it would be wise to graft in the science of life after death. We have an emerging data set that strongly implies that some part of us survives physical death. Maybe the real essence of us, our consciousness, or what has historically been called the soul. And make no mistake, that data set is growing more robust with every decade and with every life-saving advance that brings more people back from the brink of eternity. In plain English, it seems that increasingly we have real evidence of the afterlife.